Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to seasons, specifically the autumn. Because I don't know if you've been outside lately, but it's almost October, and it's usually at this time of year that I'm reminded that autumns here in America are much different to those back home in Britain. Or are they? Sorry, Halloween face. Because something else that I've noticed is that actually there are a surprising amount of similarities. And this might sound weird, especially since I've done videos in the past talking about how Halloween in America looks unrecognizable to what I grew up with. Or how the falling of the leaves is somehow a major cultural event in America, but not so much in Britain. But that doesn't mean there aren't other traditions, both natural and man-made, that both countries share. So, why don't you join me at the start of this autumn and or fall to take a look at some of those things. But before we get down into the leaves, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to this channel, do that now. First up, you know it's autumn when marketplaces start piercing apples with sticks and then cover it with confectionery. As a matter of fact, that's one of my American wife's many favourite things about autumn. But I remember having what she refers to as candy apples when I was a child growing up in the UK. And you might be thinking, what's so surprising about this? Apples are pretty ubiquitous in the Western world. Yeah, they are, but here's the thing. Since I moved to the United States 15 years ago, I've come to find that it's pretty common for one country to have a seasonal food that the other does not. Examples being Christmas pudding in England, pecan pie in the United States. So looking back, it is pretty surprising, especially when you consider the potential origin of the candy apple. The famous red candy apple is said to have been invented not in Europe, but right here in the United States. Back in 1908, a New Jersey candy maker by the name of William W. Kolb was just sort of playing around with his holiday stock when he thought, I know, why don't I dip these apples into this red cinnamon concoction and see what happens, but, you know, in an American accent. He popped a few of them in his window, and to his surprise, they sold out. Following this, he would go on to sell thousands of candy apples, and before long, they'd start showing up in markets all along the Jersey shore. As the century marched on, so did his invention, spreading across the land via regional candy shops and circuses. Circusi, I don't know what it is. But whether by coincidence or intentional mimicry, Kolb did not invent the concept of apples on sticks. Indeed, there is evidence of such a thing in England more than a decade earlier. That said, this entry, like most of the ones on this list, does come with some caveats. Because while we do indeed have this treat in the UK, it is not known there as a candy apple or a caramel apple, but a toffee apple. And that's because, unlike a lot of candy apples that you see in the US, ours are covered in toffee. Sorry for the sound effect. And the other difference, and it's pretty big, is that while I've seen candy apples distributed in both countries on Halloween, we in the UK also connect them to Guy Fawkes Night, which is not celebrated here, itself marking a major difference between British and American autumn. But apart from that, we both do candy apples, even invisible ones. And yes, while we're on the subject of apples, we might as well talk about the way in which we drink them. Obviously, both countries have year-round access to what Americans refer to as hard cider, or what we back home just refer to as cider. But, especially at this time of year, both countries like to whip out the non-alcoholic variety. But don't take my word for it. Here's me from a year ago explaining more with some caveats. Here's a story for you. Back when I still lived in England, I could often be found down at the pub ordering my third pint of cider. Now that I live in the United States, I figured it would be rude not to give my British verdict on American cider, even though I gave up alcohol 2 years ago. And I know what my US subscribers are thinking. Ooh, Lawrence, we've absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And that's because what Americans call cider doesn't actually contain any alcohol. For that, you'd have to ask for hard cider. You see, in America, cider, or apple cider, is an unfiltered and unsweetened drink made from apples, and is particularly popular at this time of year. In Britain, such a drink is known, and I can't believe I'm not making this up, as cloudy apple juice. Anyway, is American apple cider any good? Let's see. I think that's my roundabout way of saying that, as with British cider, it's very good, just for very different reasons. Oh, and while we're on the subject of drinks and beverages, that brings us on to this. That's right, Oktoberfest. Even if you've never attended one of these, you've probably heard the word before. Oktoberfest is a popular beer festival that takes place in Munich, Germany, every mostly September, weirdly. And lo and behold, Oktoberfest, you just made the list, to channel Chris Jericho. In many ways, that makes sense because the United States boasts a very large concentration of German ancestry. And in Britain, we love beer. That said, I think I only became aware of Oktoberfest when I moved to the United States, and that also makes sense. Because here, unlike in Britain, Oktoberfest had been around since the early 60s, apparently. In La Crosse, Wisconsin. Is it pronounced lacrosse, like the sport? Probably lacrosse. And this makes particular sense because Wisconsin is a state where a lot of those German immigrants settled. As is Ohio, where in the city of Cincinnati, they apparently host the largest Oktoberfest in the country. But back when I lived in the UK, which I've just decided is in that direction, even though I drank like there was no tomorrow, seriously, I drank way too much at university, which explains why I am the way I am. Even though that happened, I don't really remember encountering the word Oktoberfest until I moved here. Either way, many UK cities do in fact celebrate it today. They probably did back then, but I was just too drunk to notice. What I have just learned is that the official London Oktoberfest only launched in 2010, 2 years after I left. I can only imagine they did it to drown their sorrows. You know, when I first moved to the United States in November of 2008, I couldn't get over how many pumpkins there were, and that was just the airport. America, and particularly here in the Midwest, where a lot of those pumpkins are produced, is just one huge pumpkin parade. Which is fine, because they're nice to look at. Unless it's March. And in Britain, when I grew up, I used to see the occasional pumpkin. But since I moved here, they've apparently taken over. You leave for 5 minutes and suddenly your country is being run by Jack Pumpkinhead from Return to Oz. It's not quite like that, but the production of pumpkins has increased year on year in the UK over the last few decades. In fact, here's something that's personally interesting to me. One of the largest pumpkin patches in the UK can be found in Boston, England, just 45 miles from where I grew up. And you may have heard me say this before, that the highest pumpkin producing state in America is Illinois, where I currently live. It's as if I'm following the pumpkins or they're following me. And finally, the weather, which this week has in fact been the chief motivator behind this video. And this might sound odd to you because you're thinking, Lawrence, you're always moaning about Midwestern weather. And to that I say, not always. There are in fact 3 months out of the year where I don't. 2 weeks in spring and roughly 2.5 months in autumn. Put it this way, when I take my dog for a walk during a sweltering Chicago summer, neither of us want to be there. When I take him for a winter walk through the snow, only he wants to be there. But in September and October and November, we both say in unison, it's like England out today. It's just me that says that. Because it's true. At least it is true in the northern United States and not so much the southern, where it's really warm. This week in Chicago, it's largely been in the high 50s, 60s or low 70s. Lo and behold, London has experienced similar temperatures, and you might be going, Lawrence, that's weather, not climate. Fine, then let's take a look at historical weather data, which shows that in the month of October, Chicago experiences average high temperatures of 62 degrees Fahrenheit and London 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And both cities experience the exact same low average of 50. Admittedly, there are some colder places in the Midwest during this time, but the same is also true in the UK when you head north of London. God, I love bad science. And that's it. Those are the autumnal ways in which, through our many differences, we are in fact the same, but no, we're not the same. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced autumn. Everybody has. And what are some of the similarities and differences that you've noticed? And crucially, at this time last year, I did a video detailing my experiences of American autumn, a video that you're going to watch next. And thank you to my ponderers for making this video possible. If you would like to become a ponderer and gain access to my secret live streams as well as my secret video series, Diary of a YouTube Sensation, you can do so today at patreon.com/lostinthepond or by clicking the join button below. Until the next video, goodbye